Good day there, everyone, and welcome to my second live stream. Today will be a questions and answers time, so just waiting for anyone to come on board. So when I get a few people on board, we'll start the conversation, and it will be related to anything faceting. Hey, Rookie, how you going, mate? I hope all's well. We're just starting off, and I'll wait till a few people join in. Meanwhile, if you want to ask me some questions, go ahead. Won't be doing as much faceting today, but I may do a little bit more polishing. Hey, Ronnie, how you going? And Crystal, how's things? Yeah, I'm well, Rookie. Probably the same as most people in isolation in Australia. I guess you'll be in the same position. Not much we can do, but that's life. So for the other people who just joined in, this is a questions and answers video. So if you're into faceting or you want to learn more about faceting, just go ahead and type out some of your questions. I'll try to answer them as best as I can, and we'll go from there. Any faceters on board? I know that Rookie Rockhounding, you're into finding those agates up north in Queensland, so you can actually facet those if they've got a fair bit of translucency about them. I think if you get the right colours, they could probably look okay. So no questions yet? Well, I might as well start faceting and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we have Paul Hernandez. Hi, Paul. How are you going? Okay, first question. I want to know everything about faceting opal. Well, I'll tell you what, I've only faceted fire opal because you wouldn't want to be faceting any of the Australian black opal or the white opal. It doesn't lend itself to faceting that type of opal, but fire opal does. If you facet opal, and I've done a few times already, I think about 3 or 4 times from memory. I've had a couple of fails. I'll have to let you know that because it doesn't tolerate heat at all. That's one of the big issues with any type of opal, because once you've got it on the dop, you have to obviously apply heat to it at some point to remove it, unless you soak it off, and sometimes soaking off the opal off the dop will not get it loose anyway at times. So once you apply a little bit of heat onto the dop stick, it'll move through the dop stick and then hit that opal culet, and it will crack it, and that's happened to me. Fire opal is very soft. You really only want to be faceting it on a 1200 grit lap. It doesn't have much scintillation either, so you're only ever going to facet fire opal or an opal, whether it's a Wellow opal, that's another facetable opal, but you're only ever going to facet it just for color and for design. If you're trying to get a lot of scintillation out of it, it's not going to work very well for you. Okay, so we've got a few more people. Hopefully that's answered the first question. Ronnie, what does a good used faceting machine cost? Well, it all depends what country you live in. I live in Australia, so you would be probably looking at least $1,500 to $2,000 AU Australian. I assume in the US you'd be looking at similar, $1,500 for an older, good quality faceting machine. I'd say around maybe more 2,000. Sadly enough, I mean, any faceter who has a great machine usually doesn't sell them. Quite often, some of the older machines aren't very accurate, so you just got to put up with some of its inaccuracies. If so, then you probably don't want to pay more than $1,500 anyway. I usually find with faceting machines sold secondhand in Australia, there's way too much of an overpay. Usually for an extra $1,000, you'll get a brand new one. Okay, a few more questions. Oh, Snow Tiger. How are you going, Snow Tiger? Question and answer session, Snow Tiger. So you can just, I'll try to read all these questions as we go through and keep up. So we got Tam on board. Hello, Tam. How are you? And David. Hi, David. And SS Jagger. Okay. Can you facet diamonds on your setup? Actually, this is a question I've had quite a few times on my YouTube channel in comments. And the answer is no. I could rig it up to facet diamonds. I'd probably have to incorporate another pulley underneath, make it bigger, and get the revolutions up a lot higher, because at the end of the day, faceting diamonds is all about using cast iron disc, and the diamond needs to be held in some type of claw because they do get hot, extremely hot, so you can't glue them on. Although I have seen videos where people do glue them on and they cut a quick facet as a repair, but you'd really need to set up your machine to facet a diamond. And that's one of the things I get most traditional faceting machines, if they introduce a claw to hold onto the diamond and you got the revolutions up, there's no reason why no one could facet a diamond. Okay, I'll just answer a few more questions. Yeah, I'm just looking at what's going on. So the diamond, I've answered that. David wanted to know, would this rig be effective at shaping jade? Shaping, yeah. Look, any faceting machine you can preform or shape on. You could probably even facet jade, but once again, jade would be translucent like opal, like a fire opal in some cases. It wouldn't have a lot of scintillation, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't put a piece of jade straight onto the dop stick. And as you've seen in some of my videos, a lot of my subscribers, as they've seen me just put a gem on the dot without even a preform, I don't see why jade would be an issue either. I've actually got some from Maryborough. It's called, Rookie would probably know, but it's a type of jade or jadeite. I should actually try that one day, faceting some of that stuff. So Tam, while you're about, any questions? This is a good opportunity for Tam, and Tam has been faceting for a little while, and I guess you're beyond the beginner stage, I reckon, because I've seen some of Tam's work and it's looking pretty good, I reckon. Hello, Popo. How are you going? Okay, how do you choose? This is a good question. How do you choose a design for rough? Well, the shape of the rough does determine the design. And the reality is that with most gem cutters, you want to sort of keep as much carat weight as possible. That is actually not true with synthetic gems. I don't care about wasting synthetic gems because you can get it relatively cheap if you buy it in bulk, and in that case, you would be cutting for scintillation. Most of the time, faceting, the shape or the design is determined by the shape of the rough. And this is one of the things I actually did want to talk to anyone out there who's a faceter, is that a good question the other day I had in an email was that someone was asking about gem dealers, and I don't actually promote or talk about gem dealers online because my own personal experience, if you live somewhere where you're not close to a local gem dealer, buying online has been really precarious, because it goes back to this question just asked earlier on about how you determine what you're faceting. And I have found that buying gems online, you're getting all the oddball shapes known under the sun. Most gem cutters would like to cut rounds, squares, rectangles, maybe oval, but you generally find, this is what I found, is that with stuff I've bought offline from reputable people, every type of shape under the sun is a type of shape I would never want to facet. So I like faceting rounds and squares, but usually it ends up some oddball shape that you'd never want to facet. Okay, I'm going to answer a few more questions. Ronnie, where did you get faceting diagrams for shapes? Well, a lot of them can be downloaded on facetingdiagrams.org. I've bought books. I'm a fan of Jeff Graham, but these days I'm getting more and more into faceting my own designs, which means that I've got to use software called GemCut Studio. So, and this is one of the things about in Australia, we are not very good gem designers. The US are hands down light years ahead of us because many of their gem cuts, many of their gem clubs, they actually want people to learn how to use software. We don't do that so much in Australia. So, hi Tammy, how are you going? Oh yes, and Ricky, how's things, mate? Sorry I'm late. Any suggestions for cutting volcanic opals such as Peruvian blue or Oregon? Well, we just talked about opals, and we talked about these fire opals. Most opals are very similar in terms of softness and how they react to heat, to be quite honest. I'm not a fan of cutting too much opal. I do actually like cutting fire opal, and I've kind of learned how to do it. So that'd be one of my next projects. I don't see any problem with faceting volcanic opals, but are they opals or is that obsidian? Are they real opals? Because I've never heard of volcanic opals from Peru, but I assume there might be some around. Might remind me about that question later. That's an interesting one. So I'll go on to Tam. I think the main question I have at the moment is about ensuring your machine is balanced and level or in alignment. Awesome question. This is exactly why I've had this, because I've got my little tools next to me. Okay, guys. Now, before you set up, everyone use a spirit level, and you can put it on your disc, when you haven't got the spindle on. You can put it on the flat on the base down below. You really want to have your setup on your table with your spirit level all nice. That's not accurate reading there because it's just floating on the spindle. But to be honest, if it's not level, this faceting head here will start to spin around in all sorts of directions when you're not even touching the stone, just simply because it's so sensitive the minute your faceting machine is not level. So you're going to have to start using these as a setup. Tam, have you used one of these or spirit bubble? Because it's really important to use those prior to setting up your machine. The other day, I noticed in a YouTube video from another faceter who was demonstrating that the table was vibrating. And to be honest, this goes back to level, playing on, faceting on a level surface. Not really good. Everything has to be very secure. Your table should not be vibrating when you're faceting. That's not a good sign, because if the table's vibrating, that means this faceting arm here will be vibrating like this up against your disc, and that's silly to have that situation. Okay, Tam, does that answer your question about level or alignment, or is that something else? Sure. Are you talking about little tweaks on the master disc? Okay. Okay, I'll go back to disc in a minute, because that's a tricky one. If you want, okay, I'm going to explain this with the alignment of your master disc. You will need a D-dop, and what will happen when you set your protractor, it's 45 degrees. If you've got a D-dop, it's got a flat surface, maybe about this wide. And when you set your cheater to 0, so you've got your cheater over here, you've got to set it to 0, and just pretend that gem was your D-dop, and it's got a flat surface, so you're only aligning it on your master disc, not a polishing disc. That has to be truly aligned. If it's a little bit off center, then you're going to have to adjust your cheater. So if you've got a D-dop, then that's going to be almost a very important essential. I actually don't have one, but I actually made something a while ago to check all that out. I'll just answer a few more questions. Gee, these questions are coming up thick and fast, so just give me one moment. Tam, I think I've answered the question about alignment. Gem Cut Studio. Okay, I'll go Snow Tiger because I know he's trying to learn a lot of stuff. Gem Cut Studio is an excellent program for beginners and experts. Easy to learn. Okay, that's not really a question. Yes, it is a very powerful program. I believe it's written by an Australian designer. I know he lives in Brisbane, Australia. I assume he's Australian, but it's a really good piece of software. And I would recommend anyone who's been faceting for a year or two to go out and buy it. I think you've almost got to have it to check out, designs you're faceting to make sure they are correct. If the design is not accurate from the moment you start, well, you won't expect the stone to look very good by the end of the process. Okay, Paul, hang on, I better head off. Okay, see you, Rookie. Have a nice day, mate. I'll see you around. Bye. Okay, Paul has asked another question. I hopefully have answered all the previous ones. Is diamond best powder over cerium oxide? Why? Well, I'll tell you a lot of reasons I like diamond these days. I've used cerium in the past, and I probably will even use it occasionally in the future. To be honest, with diamond, there is no slurry buildup like you get with cerium and water. So you don't go through all these issues with swarf building up and catching underneath the facet when you're trying to polish it. The thing with diamond also is that, in my opinion, you get a lot sharper facet. That is, you can just notice it. And what I've found with cerium, and maybe other people have never had this problem, but I've had this problem, and I don't know why, but sometimes you get a piece of quartz, because most quartz you facet, such as amethyst or just clear quartz, rose quartz, whatever, all the quartz, all the gems that are in the quartz family, sometimes cerium can just knock off a little chip off a facet, and just a really tiny fragment. And sometimes even when you look at where the chips come off, you can barely see it. That chip quite often lands onto your perspex disc and gets caught up in the swarf, and then it drags a massive scratch across the facet you're trying to polish. Once that happens, that you get that big scratch embedded because of that little fragment that chips off your gem, it becomes a nightmare to remove. And to be honest, it becomes quite obvious, as when you look at the gem, that there's such a big scratch. That's one of the reasons I don't like cerium anymore. And while the diamond is polishing so well on my tin lap with the Herco Valve Oil, and I have to say, with the Herco Valve Oil, it is a lot better than just using other regular oils like your snake oil or your sewing machine oil, or God forbid you use WD-40. But it seemed to really work well with this with the Herco Valve Oil. The reason why I believe that, because all tin laps, they tend to absorb oils. So when they absorb oil, it retains oil and the diamond powder. So with the Herco oil, it's a lot thinner, and it seems to retain the diamond better into the tin. Okay, Snow Tiger, actually, one of your videos. Okay, sorry, I'm just reading. It's a pretty long question from Snow Tiger. So one of your videos and my first use of cutting assistant taught me about fastening, then 3 months of research sorry, again, you're going to have to rewrite that one out again. So you're talking about cam faceting, and well, midpoint faceting is a no-brainer. Cam faceting is an interesting one, where you're basically removing lots of materials with those facets you're actually cutting. To remove that material is not integral to the part of the actual gem at all, really. It's just a way of just eliminating material and getting down to the original facets you need to facet. Usually cam faceting is mostly done on oval type of shapes and maybe some teardrops. Okay, so for those people who are asking questions, actually it's a good point. rather than have a side conversation with statements and stuff like that, try to keep it down to questions and answers, because I'll get lost and bogged down as people keep asking. Now, before anyone, there's no more questions by the look of it, but I will mention something which has been something that's been on my mind that I did want to mention to US faceters. If you're a US faceter, historically, and this is historical, when they did the international faceting challenges years ago, and we're talking probably 20 years ago or more, when they first started, that the US faceters had a heck of a problem trying to get high scores, particularly against us Aussies. And one of the reasons why their scores were so low was that their lighting setup was way too bright. Now, I wanted to find out about this, and one of my mentors, I'll tell you who his name is, Peter Craik, a well-known Australian judge and a very good faceter indeed. I asked this question the other day. I wondered why often he mentioned why the US faceters had issues with polishing and getting a really good surface polish. And it boiled down to that US faceters usually use too bright lighting. So if you're a faceter, and that doesn't matter whether you're in the US or Australia, try to keep your lighting not so bright, because what that does, it reflects off the facets. All faceting judges use low lighting when they're looking at scratches. And I have to admit, if you use a lower lighting and you can just get the angle up against that light, it won't bounce off all that light. So that's an interesting historical fact about US faceting. And just make sure that, I know that in the US you have all these gem clubs, that they're not lighting up the whole room like sunlight indoors, because that's probably not a great thing if you're trying to polish. Okay, I'll answer a few more questions, because I'll go back to the US thing too, because there are issues we are lacking in Australia that the US are so much better than us. Okay, so welcome, Comforter, the wizard. He says he's new to faceting. I would like to learn how to identify gemstones and their properties. Could you remember a book or a website? Look, I don't know. Look, there's so many books on gemstones. I got years ago, I bought for news agents Gems of the World, and they were a series. Each week you get one, and literally it's got thousands of gemstones that you can identify. I'm not a geologist. This is more a geology question, but most faceters stick to maybe a broad range of 10 gems. Usually the most popular gem would be quartz, topaz, and you're looking at zircon, sapphire, garnet, and those 5 would be the most popular. And then as you start progressing, and depending on your budget, you can move into other gems that people like cutting. Aquamarine is popular, but once again, it's an affordability issue for me. By the way, aquamarine is part of the beryl family. Beryls do not have high scintillation, and if you want a nice blue aquamarine, I'd probably suggest you get a nice blue topaz, and you'll get it for 1/10 of the price. So yes, Tam, the lighting. Look, I don't think I've perfected my lighting 100% either. It's a tricky one to get perfect. In my room, sometimes you get cloudy days. That affects the situation. Going from a good light and heading into dawn is a tricky time for me, as it slowly, progressively gets a bit darker in this room. If I had my choice, I'd probably facet in the kitchen, because it's a better room than in here, but my wife would drive me nuts. Okay, Imari, hello, how are you going? Welcome to the channel. Would you be faceting semi-precious stones such as agates or jasper? To be honest, no. I wouldn't mind trying jade, like if I had a nice piece of translucent jade. But in terms of agate or jasper, no. Fire opal or jade would be about where I'd be heading in terms of, and jasper, has no transparency at all. So you're kind of wasting your time. But both those type of gems you mentioned, gemstones, are better for making cabochons out of. David says, thank you for the lighting tip. My club is setting up our workshop again. So I think, yeah, look, it's one of the things I think historically the US facetors have had an issue with too bright in their workshop and probably too bright in their gem clubs. Faceting judges in Australia, I think they use no more than 30-watt lights, and that's how they detect all the scratches. If you have a look at the latest international 2020 faceting challenge results, once again, Australians outdid the US again. But the world leaders at the moment are a group of Taiwanese facetors. One guy had 3 gems in the 100. That's very difficult to get a 100 out of 100 gem. To be honest, that's pretty amazing. So I think we in Australia, we have quite a bit to go. I mean, we used to be world leaders. So we've got to start catching up with the Taiwanese. So you should be able to get those results online. I can send those to you, Tam. I'll send you a PDF of the results. Okay, any more questions? I should sort of backpedal up, see if I missed any. Just scroll back up. I don't think I've missed too many. If I've missed your question, just type it out. Okay, so want to talk about something about design, and this is something I'll be looking at for those people who are faceting. It's something with certain designs you kind of think that the more facets, the more scintillation. Well, that's actually not true, and this goes back to learning how to use GemCut Studio and start learning how to design. Certain designs work really well with lots of facets, and recently the Cleopatra's Eye was absolutely just spot on in terms of lots of facets, but those facets work well within the gem. And the reason being is that with guys like Jeff Graham or Bob Keller, a lot of their designs have a deep pavilion and a very high crown, and quite often on the crown it has a small table too. But it's this combination of depth, using that depth of the pavilion and the height of the crown, brings out the brilliance of the stone. And Jeff Graham, if you go through lots of his designs, he never skimps on depth. For example, he always, as a gem cutter and as a designer, he concentrates on scintillation of the gem rather than carat weight. But having said that, a lot of those designs, if you're cutting a lot of facets, so for example, you're cutting, say, an easy design is Portuguese cut. It works really well. Portuguese cut has lots of brilliance, but once it gets too small, beyond, say, 10 millimeters, around 8, if it gets too small, then those facets will start to work against you in terms of scintillation. So with gem design, and this is something I would encourage everyone to start learning, less means more. So less pavilion facets and less crown facets will bring out more brilliance. And when I go through my GemCut Studio and I start doing the simple designs, 4 facets on the pavilion on a square leading to a culotte, and then just forming a crown, a very simple crown, you usually find that the render in particularly is getting up around 80 to 90% brilliance on quartz. And that is the key, I think, with a lot of designs. Over the years, there's been such a competition going on between people who can create the fanciest design with the most facets. But in terms of brilliance, a lot of them don't work. So I would encourage anyone who's faceting, whether you're learning or you've been faceting for many years, this is something I'm going to be doing this year too, looking at designs that really give off a lot of scintillation, but at the same time working on difficult designs, like, for example, designs that do work like the Cleopatra's eye. So I can build up myself to becoming a better faceter, but stay away from designs that are a little bit. I'm staying away from designs, for example, like that the redback spider. You know, things that have just looks appeal rather than scintillation appeal. About the dilemma of first crown or pavilion first. Look, historically, 30, 40 years ago, crowns were faceted first, but very few people to me, I have faceted crown first. I find it an odd way of faceting. And the reason why I tend to lose a lot of gem material because I always tend to cut for depth, so I don't mind losing a bit of material. But when you cut from the crown first, it is very hard to gauge how much material you need left for the pavilion. And one little mistake and you won't have enough left on the pavilion. So with cutting the pavilion first, you've got more chance of retaining material. I'll just have a sip of coffee. So any more questions while we're at it? Tam, you must have a load of questions. I should actually we talked about this in the last video, how fast and how much pressure you want to be using. I have noticed a lot that a lot of faceters are really aggressive with this style of, I'll just lift that up. Their faceting style is extremely aggressive. Gee, I was watching a video the other day from a faceting teacher, and they're polishing like this, real hard, going as hard as they can. And from what I've seen, and I know from my own personal experience, sometimes you do, but occasionally, 90% of the time you don't, particularly with polishing. Even with grinding, you don't need to be going hard. Just speed your lap up. If you want to cut more material, just, set the setting on high. You don't need to be, go rubbing and pushing, and that is a lot of nonsense. And when it comes to polishing, pushing hard on the gem and trying to just scratch and scrape, and it's not going to be a great thing for your disc. You're going to groove out your disc in no time at all, particularly soft tin laps. And unless you're a multi-millionaire, these things are not cheap. So if you're going to press hard into soft tin, you're going to dish it out in the center, and it's going to become pretty useless pretty soon. Okay, I'll catch you later, Tam. Okay. Laps, leap lap versus tin lap versus lucite lap. Okay. Good question from Paul. I've got lucite laps. I think they're really good with diamond paste. If you're making, or say, for example, if you're faceting for commercial use, say topaz, zircon are great gems to be using, in my opinion. Lucite. They polish real fast with a 14,000 grit diamond paste on plastic. And to be honest, it's very hard to tell. What the big difference is that you can actually see that the facets are not sharp because of the nature of the lucite not creating a sharp facet as would a tin lap or metal lap. So the tin lap, I think, is in my opinion, white metal laps are the king of polishing laps. They cost more, but I think the end result long term is better. Now, you can get all types of laps, a combination, say bat laps. I think they're a bit harder. They have more nickel in them than tin. A lot of tin laps have a certain amount of lead and tin, being such that they're a bit soft. But the reason why with the softer tin laps they're so good is because they are porous. They absorb the oil and the diamond powder. It's the porosity of that lap that makes it such a good lap. Whereas copper and zinc laps, they're a lot tougher and durable. They're not soft compared to tin, but the porosity is not as good at retaining diamond and the oil. Okay, so different lighting for different jobs, different slamming sort of thing. Okay, someone's just said that in the background as a side comment. Any other questions? Else I'll continue on with some other themes, and I'll show you some of the things I think you should buy as a setup, and talk about what you really need to start faceting and what you don't need. A lot of things are just an overkill. That's just a waste of time. So, for example, you might have 50 discs that you're never going to use, but you spent $20,000 to acquire those 50 discs. So if anyone wants to ask more questions, go for it, and then I'll show you a basic setup of the type of discs. I have no idea about a Sterling faceting machine. I haven't even heard of those, Paul. I assume it's probably, is it an American machine? I have no idea. I've never heard of that make. Maybe you can just tell the people who are watching this live stream what type of machine, where it comes from, because I've never heard of it. Yes, this will be posted on the channel. It will not be a 3-hour live stream. I might keep it down to maybe an hour. That would be enough. I'm not going to be doing probably hardly any faceting. You can watch my videos. Today is just a question and answer type of live stream. But what I'll do, I'll just go through some of the discs I use. Okay, for example, topper laps. This is the packaging here. This is actually a 800. I get mine from China, just to show you the way they sell them. It's just basic packaging and in plastic, so it's no contamination getting in them from other products or other diamond discs. I get these, well, I used to get these for about $27, but they've sort of gone up about $10 in price in the last 6 months, if that. You can get a set of 4, which would be 3,000, 1,200, 800 and 600. And I reckon, yes, Paul, I reckon they are awesome laps. I mean, for a price of, I think they cost about $32 to $35 Australian, so US maybe 23 to 25. Are they good? Well, I tell you what, they are that good that I won a faceting competition with 98.5 out of 100, and that is a pretty high score with using these El Cheapo laps. So, are they good? I've only competed in maybe 2 competitions in the last year. Twice I've won gold medals. So buying those chrysolite laps, which I'll show you in a moment, and these ones here, I'll just show you these chrysolite laps. Well, that's a, oh gee, try and get it this way, sorry. Well, I don't, this is a 1200, and that will probably set you back, well, this is an old one, this will set you back well over $100. They're probably 150 now, and that's a 1200, and that will wear out in half the time. Just because I'll take it out of the package. The fact that it's sitting, it's virtually bonded onto almost like a master disc. As you can see, that's basically bonded topper lap onto aluminium. Sorry guys. Look, I haven't used this much. I thought, well, I might use it for a competition one day. Try to get it in focus a bit better. But you will be paying a fortune, and you'll be probably wasting your money, to be honest, because you're going to wear this thing out within a few months. If you're faceting pretty much every second day or daily, and you're cutting once a week a gem, I would say within a month or two, that'll start getting pretty worn. It'll start to become like a 3,000 pre-polished lap. And I'd say because it's only bonded, really, it's only a bonded topper lap. You don't waste your money. The other thing also, when you start using different thicknesses or gauges of laps, obviously that's about a 10 millimeter lap, and then you start changing them over all the time on your master lap, having different gauges is an absolute nightmare, because you need to start raising. So you'll have to raise this all the time, your masthead, to accommodate for the different heights of laps. That's what I love about these topper laps, is that they're all the same thickness, and you don't need to be elevating this all the time, up and down each time you change out a lap. So, for example, you're moving from an 800 to a 1200 to a 3000. If they're all the same thickness, this just stays as it is. You might have to just lift it up a little bit here and then come down onto the facet. So this stuff here, big overpay. I would suggest that you stay away from them. The biggest overpay I've ever come across. Gee, I wonder if the manufacturers are going to watch this. They're going to love this video and hate me. These discs here, these stupid resin bonded laps. Big overpay, guys. I think I paid nearly $100, $80, 100. Lucky I've got 3 or 4 uses out of it. Doesn't polish very well. This is a cerium oxide lightning lap. I think the zirconium oxide laps, there are a few different brands. They might be a bit better. But what a waste of time and money. Lightning laps. Overpay. It's a regretful buy. Luckily, I haven't bought too many of these modern age polishing laps. These things are really designed for someone who only cuts 2 or 3 gems a year, and you just think, oh yeah, you want a quick fix, polish it, and that's the end of it. If you're seriously faceting every week, every day, these lightning laps, junk. Designed to suck people in, thinking that it's going to be the best thing ever invented for polishing. It worked great 1 or 2 times, but then didn't. So this goes back to what I said earlier. Be very selective of your laps if you're faceting, because you end up spending thousands of dollars on junk that's just useless. Now, what isn't junk? I think this is good. These Perspex laps. I get these from Gem Cuts, but with these Perspex laps, they cost about $14 or $15. They last a long time. You can use both sides. If you use both sides, make sure you mark what type of diamond paste you've used. I tend to just use one side. That's the side I use there, and that is used with cerium oxide. And these are great. These polish with diamond paste, with the THK diamond paste, which is cheap off eBay. So they're really good. So how do they attach? So I'm going to answer this question. So how do they attach? How do you mean? Can you say that? What needs to be attached there? Sorry, so I don't understand that. So we're talking about the disc. How does the disc attach onto the base plate, onto the master disc? If so, that you just unloosen the spindle, take the spindle off, and just put it on and screw spindle tight. Oh, the topper laps. Oh, how do they attach? So you're wondering how they attach onto that master disc? I don't know. I don't know how they bond them on. I'm not sure how they bond it. I'm not into engineering. But if it's just a topper lap, a thin one like that, millimeter or 2, then you just unscrew spindle. They sit on your master disc. So over this, I don't know if you can see it, but underneath this tin lap here, there's a master plate. All fastening machines have a master plate, and it'll just sit straight on top. You don't need to buy special master laps. That's another thing. People, you see websites selling master laps. Most machines have one already with it. So going back to the lucite, they're $14 or $15. If they're great with cerium, and with the cerium, the only problem you'll find is that it's probably a lot more aggressive than tin. It will polish super quick, but you will get swarf in them. Now, I don't scour any of these laps. I keep them perfectly smooth as I can. I don't think scouring a lap is very effective. I've never found it to be that effective, to be quite honest. But some people swear by it. The only thing with any lap, even with these, you do need to, just get a nail brush. When you finish using them, scrub them. So just go over the surface with a bit of, detergent, and just scrub it lightly to get anything that could possibly be contamination. And just put it away. And once it's scrubbed and put away, just take it out and use it fresh. You don't need to re-clean it on when you start up again using it. But the minute you finish with it, do clean all your discs. And that goes the same with tin laps. Like obviously between polishing, you're going to have to clean it. But when you put it away, just clean it. So you don't get any oxidization going on. It's always good to have a nice little coating of oil on it when you put it away. So particularly with copper laps, they don't oxidize. Have you used a corian lap? No. Look, all these things like corian laps, all these resin bonded laps, there are other types of laps that are made out of other materials. I've got to think now. You put me on the spot. You know what, Snow Tiger, I reckon stick to a tin lap, copper lap, lucite laps if you want to do polishing. If you want to do your basic grinding, you're going to have a 100 grit topper lap, and then don't use a 60, way too aggressive. Then go down to your 600, 1200, 3000. And if you want to do good pre-polishing, just get hold of maybe a copper lap to try that out. I found the copper lap's really good for pre-polish. And when you're doing your final polish, invest in a good tin lap or a good bat lap. Yep, I do. When that's go. So this next question, as I just said before, when I put my laps away, they're coated with a bit of WD-40 usually. Sometimes a bit of sewing machine oil after I've cleaned them too. But do I do both sides? No, I only do the side that I polish on. This tin lap is actually, it's got a thickness of about this much tin. It's actually bonded onto aluminium, so it can't rust anyway. So whatever material, which I believe is aluminium underneath. I think it makes the advantage of having a solid tin lap is you can use both sides, but I wouldn't recommend you use both sides of a lap, because what happens if you use both sides, ultimately one side's going to be touching the master lap underneath. So if you've used a really coarse diamond polish, for example, an 8,000 on this side, then a 50,000 on the other side, when you flip it, the 8,000 will be touching the surface of the master lap, which means you're incorporating contamination onto the base under here on the master lap. So don't go flipping any laps if you can help it. Some people have to. I mean, it might be affordability issue going on, but long term, avoid flipping laps if you can do it. Lucite or tin, like the bat or BAFT, which do you prefer? Tin. Look, tin has been my go-to lap for polishing. You pay a little bit for a good tin lap. Some tin laps behave differently. It depends on how much. With tin has different combinations of lead and some zinc, and some tin laps are harder than others. Like a bat lap has tin in it but has more zinc. I think I would go for a standard tin lap with a bit of lead in it, a softer, more porous lap. Bat laps, I haven't tried those, but from what I've heard, they're pretty darn good. So I would like to try one, but once again, I don't want to get caught up buying all this stuff I don't use in life. I've been caught out once or twice, not too often, but yeah, look, stick to the basics. This is one of the funny things. All the old timers who were cutting 30, 40 years ago, they had just their tin, their copper laps. They didn't use all these Spectre laps with cerium. And they really just stuck to the basics. They had this small kit of, topper laps and stuff like that. I don't think you need to really go too hardcore with lashing thousands of dollars in materials. And that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about things that you really need. So we've gone through the topper lap, tin lap. I think a good copper lap, I've discovered how useful they are for pre-polishing. In terms of investing money in diamond compounds, basically all I buy, and I'll reach over, I mean, I just buy I get it through gem cuts, but buy the burrs. Try to get the best quality. This is just an old 20 carat little vial full of 50,000 grit. But to be honest, you kind of don't need any. You don't need 100,000. Like, to be honest, I've got 100,000. Stop! Don't waste your money. I cannot tell the difference between 100,000 and 50,000. It will sharpen maybe your facets up, but really, I think it's an overpay. These things here, I'll just reach over. These are THK. You can buy those in a set, going all different microns from 100,000 all the way down to, I think, a 1,000. So it's all different grades. These are really actually good. The only thing with this stuff, you've got to pick the right one that suits the lap. I found that the 5 micron works best on the copper, and then if you go to a 3.5, which is 3.5 microns, getting close to a standard commercial finish, it doesn't seem to work too well. So clearly copper, and I've heard this with other gem cutters in our club, copper likes to work with a coarser grade diamond with some of the laps, although my faceting mentor uses copper for doing a final polish too. But his is not scoured. His disc is perfectly polished. I'll just read some questions. Okay, one of the things, Tam says, one of the big things I've been learning is not to be heavy-handed. Let the lap do their job. I'm shooting for sharp, flat facets. Yeah, look, heavy-handedness or pressing is the biggest issue most faceters find. Even my mentor says that, that's the hardest thing, is just controlling how much pressure you use on each facet. So if you're cutting a standard round brilliant, you're cutting the first 16 facets, then later on you cut the next set, your main facets. When you're going through the rotation of your facets, so for even example on this one here, as you go through the rotation, it only takes on one facet a little bit too much pressure, and that puts, and you don't even notice it. This is a thing. It could be just 1/100th of a mil. Well, that will determine the outcome of what the gem's going to, the accuracy of the gem, particularly when you do the rotation and the transfer, and you're faceting the crown. Pressure, hi Tony, how are you going? Pressure is the biggest issue. I mean, I find that myself, and keeping the focus, your concentration while you're faceting. I'm learning more and more that I'm using the gravity and the weight of particularly on small gems. Well, this is actually quite a large gem for faceting standards. This is probably going to be well over 10 mil. But with the smaller gems, you're cutting anything between 3 to 6 mil. And I think this is with Australian machines. So Tony might be able to answer this. I find that the quill weight is so heavy. So you're using just the weight of the quill and just holding the quill and the stone. So using gravity, I find really good on small gems. Hi, Jason. How are you going? What type of stone do I find myself cutting the most often? I think lately, to be honest, I kind of think it's actually quartz sometimes, because a lot of the competitions we have in Australia tend to be either quartz or synthetic. I think the stone I've often faceted the most, if I go through my entire collection of gems I've cut, I think it'd have to be topaz. I really think topaz is the stone I love cutting the most. Topaz do have what's known as perfect cleavage. To be honest, I've never struck an issue with it, but then I try never to facet on the cleavage plane. But I think topaz is the king of the gems, mainly because the scintillation is so good, and it is relatively affordable. If you could find some in Australia, if you live in Queensland, I'd be digging up my own. Yep, and Tony's spot on. Quill weight is all that's needed. Is your quill heavy, Tony, on your hauls? Because mine, with the combination of this faceting arm and then the quill, there is a lot of there's a lot of downward weight on this alone. So I'd imagine your quill head would have a fair bit of weight behind it too. And I did notice with the Gem Masters, they have a very heavy quill also. If anyone can answer the question, I haven't seen the quill on I've seen the quill on a Facetron, but are they heavy? Are they aluminium? Not too much smaller. Okay, I'm glad Tony arrived because Tony was, if you see Tony Collins, he's in the chat. Tony actually inspired me to want to go and get Gem Cut Studio. And I was talking with a gentleman from overseas, John. I hope John joins me. But he sent me an email the other day, and he was talking about the fact that in the US, that most gem clubs, they like to teach all their juniors how to use Gem Cut Studio or GemCAD. That's one of the things in their tuition classes they want to incorporate. And personally, I've been very frustrated with my local gem club. I've spoken to them several times in meetings, trying to get them to buy the software and trying to get people in. Like I'm sort of in the beginner stage, I think, because I've only had it not even a year yet, I think, maybe 8 months, 9 months. But Tony is pretty good at designing stuff, and I'm continually frustrated with our club, and I think most clubs in Australia have the same issue, that we are not pushing hard enough to learn how to use software, but we're not teaching ourselves how to design gems. In the US, they are, from what I see, they are light years ahead of us. And I think if we in Australia want to retain a really good faceting culture, we need to incorporate a little bit of that design element ourselves, that we're not only limited to using other people's designs. Maybe, and Tony's good that he joined us, because I know he's pretty busy and we're all tied up and locked up at home, but it'd be nice if he would actually come to our gem club when things are settled down and do a weekend tuition. But this, what I've seen is that it's really tough going for us to get good design courses going with people who really know how to use this software. And Tony's been using it a lot longer than I have. So, hi, Dakota. Index on the wheel on Facetron counterbalances weight. Tam says, what she says mentions that. I'll have to go up. Yeah, they feel lighter. So I've never felt the weight of a Facetron. Now, one of the things I would say, if you're an Australian faceter, and I've had a look at a lot of faceting machines, even at our Gem Club, Halls 2000 is a well-known, respected machine. What I've seen, and even from my own machine, and even some of the smaller machines of the halls, they seem almost every machine I've seen in Australia tends to be over-engineered, overbuilt, and they're very functional. But one of the things I've noticed is that there wouldn't be near as much flex in the faceting head as you would get with a lighter weight machine like a Facetron. One of the things people have said in my Gem Club about the Facetron is that, and this is an Australian thing, so this is not trying to downgrade American faceting machines at all, but the common response I've always had from some of the older, more experienced faceters, they reckon that the Facetron has way too much flex. So if anyone's using a Facetron, that'd be interesting to hear some of your comments. Hey Tempest, how are you going? Could you show us what happens to water once it's flung off the machine wheel? Well, when it comes, what happens? The water just lands in the base of the tray here. There's a little hole down here where my finger is, and that drains down a tube down the back here along the table. There's a tube underneath, And I've actually got that tube in a big watering can, a big, I think 20-litre watering can. So I just pour it into my garden, actually, give the garden a bit of a water. So I'm not, particularly in summer, you don't want to be wasting water in Australia. So that just outside my window, I've got some nice plants and they get a nice little feed. What do you do when the stone flips out? That's a good question, because to be honest, I rarely ever get dot detachments. It's so rare for me. It has happened once or twice. I'm trying to think if it has even happened twice over the years, but it has happened with cubic zirconia on a small one. I have found that if you don't rough up the surface on some of these synthetic gems, particularly cubic zirconia, even epoxy gem struggles to hold on to it with the smaller ones. With the big pieces of cubic zirconia, it's fine. What do I do with it? I'll tell you what I do with it. I don't bother reattaching it, and starting over again. I probably wouldn't bother. To me, it's just a big fat waste of time. I had one detachment, and actually that was in a competition gem last year, but it was such a small gem. It was only going to be the standard 6mm, and it did detach, and I still got it somewhere. Don't know, I might make some other stone out of it. I don't worry. Look, if you got a detachment, what do? You're going to have to either you can reattach them and start afresh, or hopefully you can sort of line it up so that you got the exact angles. Tony, you've had a few detachments, so I think you can reattach them. It'd be a good question, because I've never had that issue. I think one of the things, as I mentioned in my first video, is that it's all about consistency for me. If the glue works, and I use this DevCon, but I do let it set overnight, it's never sort of failed me, and I kind of replace it fairly regularly. And I'll show you the type of stuff I do buy. I'll just get it. This will last. So I use this one, the 5-minute, and of course I don't let it sit for 5 minutes and then go faceting. Really, I let it sit overnight. Now, I have read articles that if you want to get a quick attachment with these 5-minute glues, that you put the actual dop into a oven at very low 50 degrees and just let it sit there for an hour. But gee, I couldn't be bothered. I tend to just stick to what I find consistent, dop it, wait overnight, then start faceting. And because I'm not a commercial gem cutter, I don't need to be in such a rush. I'll just go through the steps that work for me. I think you can start faceting with this stuff within 3 hours if you're desperate. But I find this stuff pretty good. I'm sure there's aerodite or something, but I'm sticking to what works. Okay, so we're going to answer a few more questions. Tony says, never use the water. Yes, he's spot on. And the reason why you don't use the water is because you will have contamination in that water coming onto your disc. So you don't want to be doing that. And you'd have to be pretty hard pressed in a very dry climate if you decided you wanted to reuse the water. Not recommended. I wonder whether some people have, they're just recycling the water. One of the things I mentioned in my other video is that never, when you're sort of finished a gem, and for example, you've cut a very hard material, like cubic zirconia, 8.5, or, you cut sapphire, synthetic sapphire, or real sapphire, you've got to clean out your pan. Clean all the debris out, particularly if you're starting on a softer gem like quartz. The last thing you want is any debris coming onto polishing disc, or any disc for that matter, particularly if it's harder. Like I'm faceting, polishing this, but my pan is, all the debris from this gem is being cleaned out pretty much, so it's not going to contaminate my tin lap. Hang on, I'll answer. Tony says, depending on flying stones, some can be reattached, some get thrown into the rough box, some can hide in a corner till they, till they learn their lesson. Well, I've had lots of conversations with Tony, and he's in my faceting group, and we get together and have little chats, on Facebook. And when Tony has a flyer, sometimes he used to use these words like flyer, and I could never work out what he meant. But when he has a detachment, he likes to let them sulk, sit in a corner and let them sulk for a while. Unfortunately, I don't get many detachments, but I think sometimes, occasionally, if something goes wrong, I have a sulk myself. One of the early lessons I learnt in life was that never polish up against the anti-clockwise rotation of the gem going this direction, because I once did that and dug into the tin lap. Then I had to get it take to the engineer and get it nicely dealt with. What are some questions? Fresh water sounds right. Probably use distilled water, not tap water. I don't use distilled water. I just use tap water. I mean, I've never had an issue with tap water. Tam asked a question the other day in an email whether I put soap in my water, and the answer is no. And I'm not sure whether this is an old wives' tale or not, but I have seen some people at my faceting group at workshops use it. I'm not sure what it's something to do with breaking up the water tension on the surface. I knew years ago when I used to, well, I still do it occasionally, when I go looking for gems and gold panning, I had to separate the gold with mercury. Back in the old days when you could buy mercury, you used to have to add dishwashing detergent, the stuff you put in dishwashers. It's called finish. A little bit of that to break up the surface tension on the water, because what happened, the gold flakes would float to the top. So you really had to do that. So maybe there is some truth to that. You're trying to just get rid of debris and stuff off the surface that can sort of hydroplane around as it's spinning. So I'm not sure. Oh, Tony's had 3 flies in a row. Give up for a day. I'll tell you what, I think Graham at the faceting group, I once read a comment when he said, change your glue. I think it's time to start, get rid of that super glue. So I think Tony uses super glue. I'd be getting rid of it, to be honest. Actually, I found super glue to be very good, and it works really good on smaller stones. It's just a good product with smaller stones, but with the larger stones, I don't think I'd be using super glue. Okay, so there you go. So with the adding a bit, so is the detergent you're using, Tony, is that the stuff for dishwashers, or is that just your regular detergent that you use for cleaning dishes with? Because dishwashing detergent is a different product. For example, like Finish, that's supposed to get rid of all the suds and stuff like that. Maybe just normal dishwashing detergent. How much do you use? Just 1 drop in your container? Well, I must give that a try one day, put a bit of dishwashing detergent in. But I found it to be, I found no issues with water. The only time I found an issue with water, and this has been, it feels like this gem is actually aquaplaning. That's on the 3000 pre-polished discs on the topper laps. Really feels like the gem is not touching the surface and is just skimming along the water rather than actually cutting. And this has been a problem I've struck personally. I don't know whether other people had this. When I start going down to the 3000 topper lap for pre-polish, I find that you can't hear anything grinding. You feel like the gem at times isn't touching the surface, so you're not, because you've got no sense of feeling. It feels very odd, and sometimes you can overcut with a 3000 pre-polished topper lap. If anyone else has had that problem, let me know. But I think that's probably that has probably been eliminated if I keep using the copper lap, because with the copper lap, I found you get a lot more feel, and you can hear what's going on too. But it's just the sensational feel of the gem on the lap that seems to be a lot better than on a 3000 pre-polished topper lap with water. It seems not having that water makes a bit of difference. Yeah, so Jason said people use jet dry. Now that jet dry, yeah, for gold panning, and I think that's the product you need to use. In Australia, they call it finish, I believe, but it is jet dry. Yeah. So Tony, this is a thing with super glues, these CA glues. After a month, he says you've got to throw it out. I think the longevity of epoxies is about 12 months, but it is true with the super glues that you've got to kind of keep them in cold storage too, in a refrigerator, because once they get too hot, they go off. This is a question I got asked in the last live stream. What are the best books for learning cutting and polishing for beginners? And I have to say, out of all the books I've got, I kind of didn't learn a lot out of them. I actually found that having an instructor initially and going to a gem club was a great thing. But at the end of the day, when it comes to polishing, it's this connection between you and the machine, learning how fast you run the disc. For me, I don't run it too fast or too slow, and understanding how much oil you use. I do believe every polishing disc is different. Mine has, in my opinion, has a fair bit of lead. It seems to have a fair bit of porosity, and I've noticed a huge difference with absorption of oil, particularly if you use different type of oils. Like that Herco oil seems to really just settle into the disc. I think if you're going to learn polishing, it is an art form, and this is the thing most faceters struggle with. I can't polish. I can't get a good finish. Well, I think it takes a good 6 months to a year just working at it and constantly trying to get better results, but understanding that how your machine works too. I could change over probably to a different machine. I'll start having polishing issues. Who knows? I don't know. And it depends on you, your machine, how much diamond powder you use. I actually have a habit of going a bit too heavy, I reckon, at sometimes, using too much. And it's just getting the right combinations together. For me, polishing is the most enjoyable part. For most people, they hate it. But I actually love the polishing of facets. To me, it's like connecting a jigsaw puzzle together. Everything starts to just, you're cutting in those little facets to meet points, and everything starts to connect and lock in. And it's actually the grinding, cutting the P1 facets, getting rid of material, that really, it does bug me a little bit because really that's just a preform stage, in my opinion. Oh, how much do I charge for a faceting job? Nothing. I don't make money faceting. I do it for fun and pleasure. I don't do it to make a living out of. I'm not a commercial faceter, Paul. I've never sold a gem. I did one job for a friend of mine, and really it was just covering the cost. It was over 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. It was a huge gem. He paid for the rough, and I just cut it for him. And really, I said, look, just chip in a few dollars for the diamond compound and some other products I had to use. But look, I don't facet to make a living out of. Most gem cutters in Australia are recreational gem cutters, Paul. We do it because it's a hobby here, and it's a fairly we have a lot of faceters here who just do it for the fun of it. I think I think if I was sitting around all day just cutting, selling gems, and you've got to cut them at a fast rate, which I think I'm a bit slow at the moment for doing that, I don't think it would be fun anymore. I think you'd be so sick and tired of fastening after a month. To me, take away the enjoyment factor. Yes, I have Comforter, the wizard. I have set about 3 or 4 stones. This is something I'm trying to learn a little bit more about. There is a gentleman at my gem club who is into silver casting, and he really knows how to set gems and all sorts of things. So I've done a few, and one day I should make a little video of the ones I've done. They're in behind me in a box, some of them, so I might get one out later. But I'm still learning how to set them at this stage. A lot of the gems I've cut are pretty large, so they're not going to be very useful for a pendant. Okay, someone asked me about what is your opinion on Libyan glass? Well, Libyan glass I've never faceted. It's really an obsidian, so it's going to be exactly. It'll probably be a little bit harder. I've found obsidians to react and behave differently than just, God forbid, I cut normal glass, which I've never done yet. I've only cut obsidian, but I think I noticed when I cut recently. I've got to think of the gem. Oh, gee, I've can't think of the gem, but it was obsidian based, the green gem. It was very much different than helenite. So some obsidians behave and polish differently. I've never faceted Libyan glass, but I think it would be very similar to cutting glass. It would be darn hard to polish, I would think, and polishing glass. Moldavite, thank you, Snow Tiger. Yes, Moldavite polishes totally different than helenite. Helenite I've done twice now, and I don't enjoy faceting helenite, and I believe helenite would be the same as the Libyan desert glass. Look, to be honest, I made a video on polishing glass and stuff like that. Obsidian probably technically is a glass, but I don't like faceting glass. I don't see the point, maybe if you're learning, and I definitely wouldn't be faceting any of that borosilicate glass, mainly because most borosilicates come out of China. You have no idea what the constitution of that glass is. Most Chinese plastics and glass would be, I think, recycled products, and you have no idea what you're dealing with, how much lead is in that glass, what they've put into it. So I actually have warned people about that. And in one post, someone who had been working with borosilicate glass optical lenses had ended up getting silicosis, a lung condition. And that was in that post. I think Tony actually mentioned something he wrote in, and I saw the comment back. I would stay away from borosilicates, maybe normal glass. But how do you really know you're faceting just a normal, just standard silicate glass made out of sand? If it comes from China, I wouldn't be bothering, and you'd have to run a lot of water. But just read some of the questions. I think Tam says, I think setting them would teach more about the importance of the shape of the stone and thickness of the girdle to the final product. Now, this is one question about girdles, and this is something I've actually been, apart from these competition gems, but I've actually been cutting my girdles a lot thicker because one of the gentlemen in my gem club, also called Cliff, he is our head silversmith guy, and he does all the ring settings. He actually looks at our stones and he'll tell us whether the girdle is too thick. And for a year or two, my girdles, we have a habit of cutting thin girdles in Australia. So I tend to go a little bit thicker now, because he said if they're too thin, you can't set them. You'll end up getting chipping issues, things like that. So even though the gems, a lot of them won't be set, maybe in hope, maybe when I die, my son might get them and he might want to set them, use it for his wife. Hopefully they'll be able to be used one day in a setting, even if a lot of them aren't set. So This is where the US faceters, they're doing things a little bit different with their girdle thickness. They tend to cut a lot thicker girdles than we do, and particularly in competitions. Um, and this is a great question. Tony says, I hate competition girdles. I actually find them a challenge. I don't mind the challenge, but I don't know. After cutting the last couple, I think they're getting a little bit, they're getting ridiculous how thin they are. I don't know whether they should change this rule one day. Australian competitions, in my opinion, have got harder in the last 12 months. I think that some of the designs are getting pretty outrageous too. Goes back to this, in my opinion, I think we have an issue with design elements in Australia. Maybe because people aren't designing much, and those people who are setting the design rules, in my opinion, have lost the plot. The last 12 to 18 months, some of the designs I've seen in competitions are absolutely ridiculous. They are totally out of proportion, these gems. That the depth of the pavilion to the proportion of the crown is just horrible. I don't know whether Tony can confirm, but I actually said in a post on our Victorian Facets Group site, I've given up faceting any gem that looks ridiculous in a competition. I'll just see if I can. Jason says, I can send you lead glass, otherwise known as X-ray glass. Now, this is a thing. A lot of these people are starting to facet these. What are they called? But it's these bits of glass, and they're all being fused together. You can buy them for about $4.50, and they have very similar colours to Wellow Opal. They're all quite iridescent glass. I would avoid. I'd actually avoid that stuff. If it comes from China, you wouldn't know what's in it. You'd make sure you're running plenty of water. It's probably not likely you may breathe this in, but I wouldn't bother. Let's even catch up with some of these questions. They're coming in pretty fast. So New Zealand girdles are around 5%. What is the thickness of a standard competition girdle in the US? No, I think ours are 5% in Australia, Tony, not 10, is it? Yeah, prism glass. Yeah. I think the girdle thickness is a lot thicker in the US than 5%. Okay, so this prism glass, I don't know whether anyone's taken any notice on websites with fastening diagrams or, fastening. This has become a very popular piece of material that's been faceted recently. I haven't bought any, and I probably never will, to be honest. I really don't see the point in faceting glass. It teaches, if you're a beginner, it's going to teach you how to hate faceting, and certainly not going to teach you how to polish, because you want to be, in my opinion, if you want to learn how to polish, start with topaz. It polishes easier than quartz. So this prism glass, I don't see the point. Obsidian is about as far as I'd go, only because it's a natural form gem. But even then, I'm not as keen at faceted when it comes to obsidian either. It does have polishing issues. So the girdle thickness is 10% in the US? No, it can't be 2%. That's even thinner than ours if the thickness is 2% of the actual diameter of the stone. So that wouldn't be, I think, Snow Tiger, that's way too thin. I think 5% is about what you want. So I thought I might talk about a few other things. Things I think you should buy. One of these, I mentioned that earlier. We talked about buying, say, with your polishing laps, a tin lap. I'm starting to use more copper laps, so only because I had them when I bought my machine. But just basic things I think you all should have in your toolbox, and I'll start getting them. For a start. Gee, got to learn how to use this camera. Seriously, these, I reckon you'll need a pair of these little calipers. Make sure they're plastic. I've bought metal ones. Metal ones are a nightmare. They do chip stones, and these ones I just buy for $1 or $1.50. I get them in bulk. If you buy plastic calipers, don't do what I did. Give them a clean with methylated spirits or denatured alcohol, because it'll rub off all the little millimeter settings on it. But you need, if you're serious about faceting, you will need one of these, particularly if you're doing competition stuff. I like using these for measuring the outside of the squares to see, so you get an idea of if you've got accuracy, cutting girdle outlines. So that is an important thing. The next important thing, look, invest in a really good loop. This is a Bellomo loop, 10 times. I've had other loops that have been just horrible. If you buy those $20 Chinese loops, don't bother. They're made out of plastic, and what will happen the minute you clean the surface with plastic on those plastic loops, it'll put a cloud, just frosts up the surface. The cleaning detergents are no good on the cheap ones. This, in fact, is the Bellomo. I read an article a while ago in Australian Faceting Guild. This was recommended as one of the most popular loops that most Australian faceters like using. So this is one I use for all of my stuff now, 10 times. The only thing I don't really like about it is, and I actually rang up the company, is that depending what finger you use, but sometimes it's too loose. That's not too bad, but on my left hand, you've got to use it, flop around too much, which should sort of stay there. But that, if you were female, maybe that would be too big. I actually suggested they make something that could grip around the finger better, but that's probably the only issue. It cleans well. I haven't managed to get dirt in it and water. The cheap loops, when you're faceting, sometimes you get a bit of water splash on your loop, and the water ends up inside the loop, and you just can't take the lenses out. They're all permanently sealed in there. This is actually a loop I think you can actually take the lens out and clean. So if you look on this side here, you can actually unscrew it and clean it manually. Great loop, a Bellomo, and you can get them in the US for about $30, I think, from memory. That is an important piece of kit. So I would really suggest that, get a good quality loop, even if it's not a Bellomo, but that is a good thing to have. So I'll go through other little products. I keep everything I have in one tackle box. That's it. In my room, I've got a few books and a few CDs behind me and stuff like that. I don't have this is just a spare bedroom I'm in, and I don't have a workshop. So I don't intend having machines everywhere. So I keep my kit pretty simple, and it's pretty effective what I have in there. So stuff you will need, other stuff. I'll just grab it. Okay, you will need you will need a hobby knife. Occasionally you will get a stone where it won't detach, and what I do, I use my hobby knife if it won't detach, and I'll heat the blade up, and I will just detach, cut the glue off manually. So you will need one of those. They're pretty cheap. I've had this for 2 years now. I'm still using the same blade. So get yourselves one of those, and you don't need to spend $20 or $30. This one is only a cheap one for $4 or $5. So those are good. Now, what else I use? Now, this is something I use all the time. Pair of tweezers. Get some long ones, because you will need that for when you're trying to remove glue from the gem. Once it's been removed from the dot, you'll need something to pull the gem out. So that's only, once again, $1.50. I've had that for a long time. Stainless steel. Don't have to buy a $20 or $30 one. So that's an important piece of kit. This is something I have to use to undo the spindle. Very I don't know, like occasionally, sometimes I can't loosen it. So that's always in my tackle box. That's anyone can get one of those. That's for just releasing the spindle. So those 4 things. Now this is something I think this is one of the best bits of kit I reckon I've bought. One of these trade flames. I don't use those Mepho lamp things. For me, it's just a danger issue. I don't want to be spilling one of those on the ground and then we have a fire. This to me is pretty safe and effective. I've never burnt myself yet on it. I think it was about $30. It's got a little lighter in there. You just refill with butane. So that's an important bit of kit. Very important to have one of those. Or some people just use those Mepho lamps or Mepho lighter things. I think you call those denatured alcohol in the US. So those are the main things. And I have showed you before the type of discs I use. Now, this is something I have to use all the time. I'll just show you. I'll grab it. Because I don't work in a workshop, I just use my table. I found, this vise. It clamps onto the table. I use that all the time for detaching DOPs. So what happens, I'll take out these plastic covers. The DOP will go inside the vise. So this clamps onto the table. And then I'll use my butane flame to heat up the DOP and then pull it off. Because when I'm pulling off the DOP, we'll get around this way, I want to be pulling it vertically. I don't want to be twisting and turning and stuff like that, because if I'm pulling directly out vertically, I don't want to chip the coolant. So that way it avoids chipping a coolant. The minute you start twisting up and down, and this is one thing I've seen a lot of people do when they're removing the DOP, imagine that's your DOP with the gem, and what they do to remove the gem's attached to the end, have heated up the DOP, and then on a hard surface, they just go like this, press it off. So what you're doing, in fact, you can chip your coolant. It's sort of dumb when you think about it, to push the gem off. You want to get the gem, I'm hopeless with this camera, and just try to pull it off vertically as the DOP heats off. Once again, I like to do everything in a certain process. So once the gem comes off the heated DOP, I make sure that it has glue around the coolant no matter what. Some people think, oh, don't ever put glue into the cone head of your DOP. You can't get the gem out. Well, I've never had a trouble ever. I like to keep the glue around the coolant. It protects the coolant from chipping. So when you remove that gem off that DOP by heat, and once again you're pulling vertically, you want to retain a plug on the gem, in my opinion, if you can. Some people don't bother. I like the plug because I'm not too fussed whether I just put it into some paint stripper or acetone to dissolve it. I'd rather take my time, let it soak overnight or within 5 or 6 hours, and let that dissolve off, and then make sure you got a gem. The last thing you want to do is spend 20 hours cutting a gem and then trying to detach a gem and doing something really dumb by pushing it off, breaking your coolant after all that work. This is dumb stuff. So, be careful of removing gems. This is one of the things my mentor said, don't be too impatient on that. We all are. We want to get that gem off the DOP once it's completed. Just wait a little bit. I'll read some of the comments. Tam, have you ever rubbed a brass stick over your facet edge before the final polish? No, never done that. Have you ever I don't know. Have you? No, never done that. So you're saying that the brass, obviously brass sticks to the coating of the brass sticks to the facet. No, never done that. But actually, that'd be good to see someone do that. Oh yeah, look, I'll use a Sharpie to do it if I want to check meat points. No, I haven't actually seen aluminium sticks used either. So that's interesting. So I tend to use these. Okay, I don't know what other kit. Now, cerium, when it comes to cerium oxides, I'll grab that. I'll just grab that. A lot of people use this. They use cerium. I get the optical grade one in bulk. This is from a actual really good supplier in Australia called Polish Plus. Not all ceriums are the same. Not just like diamond. Not all diamond polishes are the same. This is really a good product. And apparently there's a white cerium that is the best. And I've been wanting to try that, so haven't been able to get hold of it. But I get a really high quality cerium. This costs about 35 was the last time I paid for one of these, probably 50 now, who knows. But get a big tub of it, and usually they come in little packets. Well, you do go through a bit of this stuff sometimes, so that's a good product to have if you like using cerium on perspex. So really, those are the things that I use pretty much all the time. I don't know what else. I mean, geez, not much else really you kind of use. You know, Sharpies is important, of course. This is what I use a lot of, and this is denatured alcohol or methylated spirits. I actually use that too, because if you're using a Sharpie, but I like cleaning the gems with that when I've got dust and stuff, because it just seems to evaporate so quick. And of course, this product here, WD-40, and we talked about that in the last video. Cleaning discs is always something that has to be done, particularly on tin. And one of my subscribers said there's a lanolin version of this. So I'm going to check that out, because that sounds really good, the lanolin version. Just remember, when using this stuff, it's flammable. Also, it's quite toxic to breathe in. If you're an asthmatic or whatever, you probably won't want to be using this too much indoors for cleaning a disc. When I clean it, I always put the little tissue paper in a plastic bag sealed, just because it's so many fumes that comes off this. It's not a pleasant product, WD-40. So that's something you will need. Now, something I recommend, if I can find it, is something so you can look into your gems. And I'll see if I can find this product, because I do have it. Okay. Sometimes you need to look into a gem to see if it's got any flaws in it or fractures. I like benzyl benazate. Look, you don't need to get this. You could probably use cinnamon oil. You can use most oils, but find oil that has a high refractivity that can really peer into that gem. I got this off eBay, and it's got to be virtually pure. The reason why I like it is because all these other things I've used, like wintergreen oil, cinnamon oil, it just stinks up. It really stinks. And you're looking through your gem, and then you know, just the gem stinks. It's a very pongy material, a lot of these oils. Not only that, be careful of certain oils because they are carcinogenic. This one is not, apparently. But I bought a couple packs of this, and I've just got it in a jar, and I've just filled the jar up in one pack, and I've had it for about nearly a year. So I use benzyl benazate. I find that a great product because it doesn't stink out my room. So that's another thing you will need for gemstones, to just check out whether they've got fractures or inclusions. Good product. In my opinion, this product here is the same as a product called Refractol. It's I don't think you can buy Refractol anymore, which had one of the best oils for looking into gems, but someone's rebadged Refractol and called it something else. So in my opinion, I think they're using benzyl benazate. Save yourself some money, buy this stuff, or cinnamon oil, because these Refractols are selling at $50, well, Australian, for a little bit of it is an overpay. So not sure, what do you guys use on oils to look into gems? You can use cinnamon oil, wintergreen oil is good. Okay, so Tam is saying it is important to keep your lap stores separately to avoid cross contamination. Wash your hands. Yep. Okay, so cross contamination is, in my opinion, one of the issues you need to avoid. What cross contamination is not cleaning your discs, and after swapping discs, often you can get debris from a disc onto another disc if you're not careful. Often you'll get those debris from your hands. So, for example, if you're doing a pre-polish on a copper disc and you've used an 8000 pre-polish and you still got that polish on your fingertips, and then you go onto your tin lap, which is designed for 50,000 final polish, the last thing you want to be doing is ending up with a coarser grade diamond polish impregnated into your polishing laps. It'll end up just scratching the facet surface. So I have a habit of I always have wet cloths. So, for example, this is damp cloth, and I will wipe my fingers even when I'm doing a final polish on that. These cloths get washed regularly, so we're trying to eliminate any diamond or any other debris getting in that. So you'll need several of those. Excuse me. Got a bit of a hiccup going. So with contamination, use regular different cloths for different grades of contaminants also, if you can do that. In point of fact, this is what's in shortage lately in Australia, but I use a lot of this for cleaning my gems, toilet paper, and then I'll wipe and throw away. So that sort of becomes an easier option if you don't want to change out cloths and things like that. So that's a good product. So cross-contamination, I think if you're in a gem club and you cannot get your facets polished when you're using their equipment, you will find that the leading cause will be cross-contamination. Okay, what else? So there's a bit of backwards and forwards between conversations here. So Tony's having a conversation with Tam, and Tempest must be having a side laugh. He's laughing at something. Okay, so now that's another bit of an important kit recently discovered, and this is an issue I've had for years, is these for cleaning gems, final cleaning, then putting them away into storage. I've been using these lens wipes that you use for that you use for glasses. These are the old cheapo ones from a chemist. I have had literally years of trying to get specks of dust off gems, and this is the one product I found that works really well. You sometimes get occasional lint from these, but these are pretty much lint free, and you just toss them once you've cleaned your gem, put them away. For those of you who've noticed my final reveals, I really struggle, particularly on the darker gems, to keep any dust off them. Australia's a pretty dusty place. So if you want to keep your gems clean and clean your eyeglasses at the same time, this is a really good product. For $3.50, you get 30 of them. And if you want to pay more, you can pay $7.50 and get the really high quality ones, but these seem to do a great job. So, yep, this is a product this is just out of a local chemist called Priceline. But for those facetors out there in Australia, this is the cheapest one I could find for around $3.50 for 30 wipes. So it'll last months. So good product. I've been using all sorts of things like methylated spirits or denatured alcohol with optical cloths. I've been using jewelry cloths. None of them have worked. These jewelry cloths you pay $30 for, and then they still leave lint on the gem. It's just ridiculous. So these are good. So I'll answer some more questions. We'll just say Hi, Jeanette. How are you going? I'm supposing you can send your laps away for resurfacing. Only the polishing lap I've had resurfaced to a local engineer once. As over time, they tend to dish out because it is a soft metal. In terms of the topper laps, you know, when they're worn out, I toss them. What will happen is that the 3000 pre-polish and the 1200 will be the first that you will need to toss out, and those are the ones I've ordered to get because you know they wear out a lot quicker. I have to warn you with these laps here. I'll just show you a 1200. Okay, this one's still going okay, but what will happen with any topper lap, the diamond plating on them, eventually you'll get little patches that wear down to the base metal, and it will only be a little speck. And sometimes it's really hard to see that speck where it's worn down to the base metal where there's no diamond at all. If your gem catches into that little patch where it's just worn to the base metal, it will chip your gem, particularly on quartz. And the last thing you want to be doing is chipping your gem on a pre-polish as you're getting closer to the end. These ones here, I mean, when you start noticing they're getting a little bit on the worn side, I'd be really tempted to toss them and just renew them. The downside is that means they've got to be broken in again, and in my opinion, it takes quite a few gems to get a really good topper lap back to a really top-notch pre-polish lap. What I've done, I actually have I have a piece of, well, that went wrong many years ago, the Cleopatra's Eye. I've got it in my dop stick block, but I use sometimes an old bit of cubic zirconia to break these in and go, just go at it for about 10 or 15 minutes to wear off some of the original diamond plating, because they are very coarse and aggressive, 1200s and 3000s. And if you do that, then it'll become a really good pre-polished lap. So I don't know what else I can show you, because I reckon that is getting close to pretty much all my basic materials. What I do like to have nearby also is a good quality torch for, obviously, if you want to look at the gem. Sometimes you get bad light. I use that just for looking at stuff occasionally, and that's about it. The other thing, I've got a UV torch. Sometimes that's good for telling the difference between whether you got a ruby or not. But apart from that, it's not much else you really need. You will need quality oil. So I use this for a final polish, the Herco, but I also use sewing machine oil and a combination. I don't use WD-40 anymore. I don't have any cabbing wheels, so all my preforming has to be done on here, or I do my preforming at the Gem Club. So, this is another bit of kit I use all the time. Toothpicks. So I use that for gluing gems onto dops, and I find these pretty good for just mixing the glue together and using this to get the gem, nicely, seated onto the dop, and then apply a bit of glue around it. One of the things I do, and this is the thing, I don't get many detachments because I tend to over glue. I will almost glue up to the girdle outline when I'm doing transfers. No trim saw, no. Actually, I do have a little diamond saw that's in my cupboard. It's a portable one. So that's only used for, little bits of gem, no bigger than 15 mil, 20 mil tops. If I'm cutting really large bits, like of cubic zirconia, like off those big long rods that you buy, I have to go to Gem Club. But these things I use all the time. So that's up to you whether you use those or matchsticks or whatever. And really, apart from that, it's not much else I really use, to be quite honest. I've got other stuff in my tackle box that I take down to the Gem Club, but that's mainly for cabbing gems. At the end of the day, if only thing, this is my own experience. Buy what you really need. They're only going to be all those items. Buy the laps that you really think are going to work. I would not waste any money or time on all these laps like the lightning lap anymore. Just an overpay. And really, I want to be saving money because I'm not a millionaire. Okay, in one of your older videos, you mentioned a mystery white polishing compound. Okay, that's a really good point. You know what, this does work. So I'm going to show you this now. I don't know whether you can even get this product, but it's in my tackle box, and I have used this on lucite. Hang on. Here we go. This is the mystery compound. It's called Plastics, and I've found that to work really effectively in the days when I was using cerium, and I would put a couple drops of this on to my. What it did was cleaning. It was kind of cleaning my lucite lap, keeping it nicely, polished at the same time, and it did really help. In point of fact, it could almost, on certain gems, softer gems, polish to a degree, but this with the combination of cerium really kept a beautiful, nice, slick surface on the lucite lap. If anyone wants to give it a go, and to be honest, for polishing out scratches on plastic, it is the best product from Maguire's, called Plastics, and I keep that in my tackle box. So, and apart from, look, I don't use that. I wouldn't say that's a necessity, but if anyone wants to give that a go, I think it has something to do with surface tension also on lucite laps. So that is the mystery compound. Give it a go, see what you think. I think it's, look, as a product, if you're not even using for faceting, you've got a polished plastic, it'll still come in handy. And that's pretty much it. I don't use much else. So what are we looking at? A total of products, maybe $100 in products, if that. From your calipers to your Sharpie to your lens wipes. That vise that I bought, which is my desk vise, that cost, I got that from Audi at the time, but you should pick those up in any hardware store for $30 or $40. I reckon there's about $100 worth of materials. The biggest cost I find personally is diamond polish and maybe the laps. And eventually you probably will need, this is not going to last forever. Something can happen to it. It can get contamination. So the biggest cost is getting this resurfaced. I think I average around, because I do a fair bit of faceting, I'm kind of thinking when you combine the rough and all the materials, it's probably costing me around about $30 to $40. And probably maybe the internet fee is the biggest cost too these days. $200 roll of toilet paper. Yeah, that's for sure. I'll just see if there's any other questions. Okay, don't know. So Tam's going. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it. I'll give you a minute or two. If anyone wants to ask me any more questions, I'm going to sign out. We've been here longer than an hour again, so time flies. So no more questions. I think I've covered a fair bit today. So if I've forgotten anything, I'll make another video and I'll mention that in another live stream. Oh, what have you got a question, Tony? Facet rough is ridiculously expensive. Look, I got to tell you that this is becoming an issue from an Australian point of view. And I believe if you live in Canada, it's probably the same issue. Snow Tiger lives in Canada from memory. Our dollar is not worth a pinch of salt lately. It's just the difference between the greenback and the Aussie dollar has thrown the price of gems from overseas way beyond, in some cases, that I could possibly afford. So, yeah, see you later, Tony. So Snow Tiger, I'm with you on that because it's got out of control at the moment. and this is the thing I've mentioned to some of the sellers who sell from the US. I don't think they have an idea of how much it costs in Australia or maybe Canada, other countries, Europe, how much good quality rough is. Not only that, it's the shape of the rough. A lot of these online sellers are selling. A lot of it's just useless. You got to waste so much material, and I tell you what, it's got to the point where I wouldn't be buying any more light blue topaz from overseas. It's too much money. Yeah, but even like the sapphires from Queensland, this is a question, Dirk. 2 or 3 carat sapphires, you're paying $150 to $300. And by the time you've cut a 2.5 carat sapphire, and we're talking about strained sapphires, which I don't think they're not the best quality always at times either. Most of the time they're not deep. They're not the type you want, really deep, that'll cut a nice deep standard round brilliant. You got to, you're paying $150 to $300 for something that's going to be a carat. That's a lot of money, I reckon, for a tiny little 4mm gem, maybe 5mm. If to be cutting a 7mm Australian sapphire in a standard round brilliant, I would think that you'd be paying a minimum of $500 plus just for the rough. And you hope and pray that piece of rough doesn't have any inclusions in it, because it could have too. The prices, I think, are pretty much out of control, even for some of Australian rough, apart from smoky quartz or citrine or normal quartz, which is fine. But I just wonder whether, the people who mine sapphires actually realise that they're a little bit on the pricey side. Not sure. If they're selling them for that price and able to sell them, maybe, that is the market price, but it's certainly from a recreational faceting point of view, I can't afford it. Okay, Paul says acetone is good to clean the glue. Well, acetone is good for super glues, Paul, but I find it very ineffective for epoxy glues, to be quite frank. So, yeah, so look, if 1.5 carat dark, Dirk says he's ended up cutting a 1.5 carat dark, $20. Yeah, and that's probably, you can get lucky, I guess. I really haven't had that luck. I find that Australian sapphires are too dark. They're way too dark, and they need to be lightened up in a lot of cases. Yeah, $10 a carat for low quality. Yeah, but Tony says that. But do you want to facet low quality sapphire? Look, the Aussie sapphires are nice, but I think if they're not light and they're a bit on the dark side, I actually try to recommend people get African sapphires. They're lighter, they show the facets and scintillate a lot better if you can get them in a lighter pink or a lighter blue. Dirk says finds it hard to find a decent supplier. I agree. What I thought was a decent supplier in the US. I would not consider him anymore to be a decent supplier. All odd bod shapes and gems and pretty slick outfit they are, but I would not recommend anyone who sells online. I think if you're going to pay big bucks, 200, 300 onwards, you'd really want to be having a good look at that gem in person. This online purchasing is an absolute joke. A lot of the gems look really good on the photo, but in real life they're duds. If I could warn anyone, just be wary of online buying of gems. It's different if you're only paying $10 or $15 for, like what Dirk said, $20 for a bit of sapphire. It's not a king's ransom, and sometimes you get lucky, you cut a 1.5 carat gem. But from what I've seen with Tanzanian sapphires, it's telling 5-6 carat sapphires, but kind of look a bit dodgy. at the best of times, just a shape, and they're selling for 500 to 1,500. That to me is just an overpay, and you could end up with a very very bad sapphire. It could be a real dud. How do you think clear aqua comes up? I mentioned this earlier in the video, and you can look back in the video. I've got a bit of aquamarine, light blue. It's a beryl. All aquamarines are part of the beryl family. You will pay a fortune for a good bit. That it's not cheap. Lighter blue. To be honest, you're better off to invest in a nice light blue topaz, even sometimes if they're irradiated. Aquamarine, you're not going to get a great scintillation. It's got a very low RI, refractive index. So my opinion, and I've discussed this with other people at my gem club, and I've kind of looked at it myself, I wouldn't be spending much money on aquamarine. To me, it's one of those gems that, a bit like diamonds in some ways, they are probably over commercialized in terms of being a gem that have high value. But from a faceting point of view, we are all looking at gems that have low value but high scintillation if you're a recreational faceter, if that makes sense. Aquamarine, I'd love to cut it, and I've cut beryls. Beryls are easy to polish, so that's what it has in its favor also. You get a good polish on it. But wouldn't you be better off to buy topaz at less than 1/10 of the price and have a nice blue topaz? I doubt that many people, once you've cut that aquamarine, you've got it in a pendant, no one's going to walk past you and say, damn, that's a nice aquamarine. They're not going to know if it's an aquamarine or a topaz. Actually, they'll make more of a comment with topaz because it will sparkle more. Oh, which is my wife's favorite gem. You know what? It's a diamond. And she likes sapphires, yellow and pink sapphires. But I think for her, it's a diamond. That's no doubt about that. And I don't facet diamonds, and I wouldn't have the ability to facet diamonds. I'll just read some of these questions. Lab spinel is relatively good, Tony says. Yep. Wouldn't mind getting some more lab spinel. I haven't got a lot of it. Dirk's sick of playing with topaz. Yeah. Look, I've never got sick of it, to be honest. Actually, that's gone up a lot in price too. So if you're buying that irradiated Nigerian topaz from the States, that's got very expensive. So I'd be probably just sourcing some Australian topaz. Okay, a couple more questions and then I'll sign out. So going back to, if people are sick of faceting topaz, and particularly the light blue ones, there's not a lot of options anymore apart from aquamarine. So if you're into blue colored gems, then there is a limitation, because then you end up going into synthetic gems. A lot of people don't like the idea of faceting synthetics. I've actually grown to love cutting more synthetic gems. There's something about, if you're designing stuff, that you really kind of want to be working with synthetic gems, because if things do go wrong, there's not a huge overpay. And unless you know a lot about gemology, there's some of these synthetic sapphires pretty much undetectable. You're going to have to do various tests to tell the difference. I agree with Tony. I've cut a bit of spinel, and I think that comes up pretty well as a synthetic gem. Are you planning another gemstone hunt with Jaws? Well, you know what? I'd like to go up to El Dorado again and look for some more citrine and smoky quartz. So that is on the cards, and no one can stop me yet from going up the creek, literally, looking for gems. I actually want to try a little bit lower down the creek where people would probably not look, and see how I go. because Eldorado Victoria has some of the best quality citrine I've seen. I think it rivals some of this really nice golden citrine out of Africa, if not better, the honey citrine. How do you, this is a question from Paul, how do you put accurately the preform to the dop stick on the transfer jig? So I'm assuming you're doing the first transfer. Look, I don't spend a lot of time when it comes to putting a preform gem on. What I do, I should show you that piece of kit, but if I've got it available, I use brass calipers. I don't know where it is, but up there somewhere. I use brass calipers to mark the center. For example, if this was I'll just show you. If this was, for example, get the camera up right. If this was for example, a preformed gem, and I've roughly made it round, I would get my brass calipers and just roughly center it, and then I would mark there, come over this side, mark that side, and I'd find a center point. So, because what the brass does, it leaves a little mark on the surface of the preformed gem. That's how I would find the center, and that I would dot from that center point. I'd use a little highlighter then once I found center, and just mark it out with this highlighter, put the dot on. When these days, depending on the gem, if it's synthetic, I will just stick it roughly straight onto the dot without even marking it, and just center it up by eye. If I'm not too concerned about losing material, as I wouldn't be on certain gems, I'm not going to sit there for half an hour or 10 minutes trying to get everything perfectly centered onto this dop stick once I've done the initial preform. Or even if it's just a rough piece, I'm just going to cut straight from the machine. I've found, and this is what my mentor, he does this all the time, he only ever sticks the gem straight onto the dot without preforming. And when he first mentioned this, I actually thought it was a joke. But he actually just sticks it on and he cuts from there. And one of the reasons I like doing this, and I've done it with this gem, is just stuck it straight on the dop stick without preforming it, because it already had a similar shape, is that you waste so much time grinding, and then you still got to cut out the initial facet outline. And I just cannot be bothered doing that stuff, particularly on material that's, is not going to be worth a fortune. And I'm not cutting for carat weight. I'm cutting because I want to cut a nice gem, and I'm not too fussed if I lose 1 or 2 millimeters on the girdle outline. Does your club have any rough in bulk to save members? Yeah, our club is pretty good. A lot of members have lots of topaz, and they give it out once in a while out for nothing when we have our faceting meets. And the thing in Australia is that a lot of the old timers who used to fossick back in the 50s, 60s and 70s, even up to the 80s, they are literally holding kilos and kilos of topaz. They're never going to use it, but the unfortunate thing is they might be 80 years old, but some of them aren't very keen to share it. And at the end of the day, it's going to end up in the garbage chip when their grandkids get hold of it when they pass away, and they're going to throw it in the bin. So I kind of think that a lot of the older fossickers need to share a little bit of their surplus, because it will come in handy for any learner. Okay, I'm going to sign off, everyone. I think I've answered enough questions in this live stream. If you miss a little bit, then you can go back to the start and watch the start. So take care, everyone, and it will be over and out for me. Wherever you are living on this planet, it's a time to look after yourselves. So everyone do the right thing and look after yourselves. So it's bye for me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.